What should I be eating when I'm breastfeeding a child? A question we get very often when working with clients who are new mommies. Congratulations, if you're watching this video, you're probably a new mommy. And I can't imagine it's an easy job. And through this video, I do wish to give you actionable tips you can follow, especially when it comes to nutrition. We will be discussing the important nutrients to consider when you're breastfeeding. Supplements, do you need to supplement or not need to supplement? Why you should avoid dairy milk, giving dairy milk to young infants. What are obesogens? What are things in the environment that can impact the growth of your child? And last but not the least, we will also discuss some common myths I've heard from my clients and help you further understand if they are right or wrong. Let's dive in. This is Roshni Sangvi. I'm a registered holistic nutritionist. Now, what nutrients should you consider when you're breastfeeding? The top 3, what I think are important when working with clients is number 1, proteins. Indian food in generally is processed grains. We don't have as much millets, we don't have as much whole grains. We mostly stick to white rice and wheat, and we don't have a lot of lentils and pulses either in our diet. And that means you're not getting adequate amount of proteins. Now, I do suggest people to follow a plant-based diet because it is very important in terms of disease prevention, in terms of longevity, in terms of your overall health, and even very anti-inflammatory and protects you from things like cancer. But that means paying a little bit of extra attention to your protein needs. Especially when you're breastfeeding, your protein requirements are slightly higher than otherwise, which is about 10% more than you should be consuming. Ideally, I suggest my clients to eat about 0.8 to 1 gram protein per kilogram body weight. If you're resistance training, slightly more, and if you're breastfeeding, 10% more than that. What does that mean when you convert it into numbers? If my body weight is 55 kilos, I should be eating about 55 grams of proteins and 10% more if I'm breastfeeding. And the 10% more would be about 5 to 7 grams more of proteins, and that is equivalent to roughly half a serving of lentils or pulses per day. Generally, when you're breastfeeding, try to see if you can eat about 3 servings of whole grains. By whole grains, I mean brown rice and not white rice, and millets, ragi, bajra, jowar, seasonally, whatever is available around you, any of these millets, 3 servings per day, and 3 servings of lentils or pulses per day. It does not have to be heavier beans like chickpeas and kidney beans if it does not suit your digestive health or your baby is acting up. But even things like legumes and lentils like masoor dal and tur dal include about 3 servings per day. So add like a handful of sprouts to your salads, to your soup. 1 to 2 tablespoons of hummus or any other kidney bean dip or any other bean dip is a great idea. You can prepare this in bulk and keep it in the fridge. Protein is one nutrient. The second nutrient is calcium. Calcium needs are slightly higher when you're breastfeeding, so you want to make sure you're getting adequate amount of calcium. Fortified drinks, fortified plant-based milks are a great option. Tofu is a great option, and leafy greens are another great option. Leafy greens are in fact a good ratio of calcium to magnesium and very, very important for you. They also are very high in phytonutrients, helps your body. So 1 to 2 servings of leafy greens, a handful, 1 to 2 handfuls of leafy greens with every meal, adding tofu or tempeh or soybeans, just the soybeans, not the soy chunks, soybeans and tofu once or twice in a day is a great option. Number 3 is omega-3. Omega-3 fatty acids are found in nuts and seeds, so things like flaxseed powder and chia seed powder. I like to ask women who are just breastfeeding, some of my clients, I like to ask them to make flaxseed laddus, which has dry fruits and flax seeds and dates, and make like laddus and can be stored for a couple of days together, so you don't have to prepare it every day. Or chia seed laddu, or even making like health bars. Not very difficult, does not require baking or anything. You just make it and then keep it in the fridge and just, it's a grab and go snack, but also a great way to introduce foods which are healthy for you. Besides this, your hydration is very important. More than 80% of breast milk is water. And if you're not hydrated enough, you're not producing enough milk also. You want to make sure you're drinking anywhere between 12 to 16 cups of water per day. If you don't like water by itself, then infused water and herbal teas. By herbal teas, I don't mean tea leaves, but really just herbs and spices mixed in water if you're living in a colder climate, or infused water if you're living in a warmer climate is a great way to make sure you're getting adequate amount of water per day. But monitor it. Make sure that you're measuring your water. Make sure you get like bottles of water and keep it in your environment and easily available so you're drinking enough water through the day. Are there any supplements you should be considering? Two important ones, vitamin B12 and vitamin D3. We don't naturally get this in our diet because vitamin D3 is sunlight exposure, and we don't get as much sunlight exposure as we think we get. And vitamin B12 is through contact with soil. So when you're in touch with the ground, you're in touch with the soil, you're getting a little bit of B12 through your skin because it's absorbed through your skin. But again, we are not exposing ourselves to outside environment as much, and thus a B12 supplement is very important. B12 deficiency can increase the risk of various problems, including depression. So don't ignore it. B12 supplement is very, very important, and D3 also is very, very important. The only other supplement which I do consider is important for some clients is omega-3 supplement. If you're not having enough omega-3 or healthy fats in your diet, you're not able to focus on every small thing about your nutrition, then taking an omega-3 supplement also helps. Besides this, you don't need any other supplement. Of course, case-to-case basis it can differ, but mostly you will not require any other supplements for your breastfeeding. Now, what are obesogens? Obesogens are essentially chemicals in the environment which you can be in contact with that can disrupt hormonal functions in your infant and lead to greater fat storage later in life. So infants exposed to obesogens in their environment have more of an affinity to store body fat later in life than infants who are not exposed to obesogens. Where do these come in contact from? When you're a breastfeeding mom, becoming a little bit aware of the obesogens in your environment is very important. I've created a list and it's attached in the show notes below, and you will be able to, identify a few of the obesogens and make sure you're trying to stay away from them. It is important, especially because we are living in a very, very hyper-chemicalized world. We are living in literally a sea of chemicals, and trying to see if you can identify a few of them and keep them away from you is very, very important. Of course, when you have a young infant, there's so many things to worry about. The last thing I want is for this video to make you more stressed. This is for your education. This is for your important, and do the best which you can. Now let's come to the point of why infants should avoid dairy milk. For various reasons, I do suggest that infants be breastfed as much as possible. Obviously, when it's not possible, you're not going to be able to breastfeed, but choose a formula which is free of lactose, which is free of dairy milk. One reason is allergens. The infant's digestive system cannot break down lactose as well, and that can lead to digestive problems and allergies also, including things like asthma later in life. In fact, casomorphins, one of the components found in dairy milk, in cow's milk, is also associated with delayed motor functions with kids with autism. So let's say you do have a child with developmental problems, then casomorphins can only make it worse. Dairy milk consumption also increases your risk of type 1 diabetes by as much as 50%, which is huge. So especially if you have a family history of diabetes, type 1 diabetes, best to avoid dairy milk. Dairy milk consumption, of course, in areas when you don't have access to nutritious food, which is vegetables and fruits and whole grains and pulses, nothing more than that, can be a source of nutrients, but it's very, very poor source of calcium. It's a poor source of proteins. It's not the healthiest source, of nutrition for the child. A child should be exposed to breast milk whenever possible, or a good formula milk which does not contain any dairy products in it. Dairy, especially dairy milk which has been adulterated, which is most of the milk which you have, like commercially available milk right now, can also expose the child to obesogens, which, as we have discussed just before some time, can increase your risk for obesity later in life. Thus, for this and many, many other reasons, I do suggest that kids stay away from dairy milk as much as possible. That means absolutely no milk and no consumption of dairy products like paneer, cheese, butter. All of these also not healthy for you. Now let's come to some of the myths which you might have heard. Number one, ghee increases milk production. There is absolutely no scientific base for this. Your milk production depends on your hydration status and overall nutrition and overall intake of food. Ghee specifically has no property that increases breast milk production. You can go completely off ghee and you'll be completely fine. Ghee is high in saturated fats and also something called AGEs, advanced glycation end products, that causes inflammation in the body. For this and other reasons, I stay away from ghee. I don't suggest my clients to have ghee at all as part of a healthy diet. Number two, breastfed babies are clingy. This is not true either. The child's upbringing in an environment depends on the child's behavior and attitudinal traits and personality traits, but breastfed babies are not necessarily clingier than babies which are not breastfed. So feed your baby, breastfeed your baby for as long or as little as you want. Number 3, all babies naturally cling on to mother's breasts, and that is not true either. If for whatever reason you're having difficulty in terms of your baby latching on, then that is completely normal. I do suggest my clients work with a lactation expert and work with someone who has experience in this field. It makes your journey so much more easier, especially if you have access to, and if you don't, we have a lot of free resources online. But if you do have access to, work with an expert in terms of understanding your baby's requirements, and it makes the process much easier. But if it's not naturally happening, it's okay. You're on the same boat with a lot of other people, and women struggle with this all across the globe. Number 4, mothers should avoid exercise and physical activity while breastfeeding because it reduces breast milk supply. Not true at all. If anything, it keeps you a little bit more healthier. Mothers should not avoid exercise. Now, granted, it can be inconvenient, and women might want to start exercising, or the type of exercise introduced can be different in different phases of your postpartum journey. And that's a decision you want to make yourself. And let's say you're very physically exhausted, you probably don't want to exercise. Let's say your calorie intake is very low, you probably don't want to exercise. But overall, exercise only has positive benefits when you're breastfeeding, and no negative benefits. Should be looking at least staying physically active, even if it is in the form of doing 30 minutes of yoga per day at home. Just turn on a YouTube channel and following postpartum yoga. That can help, but exercise should not be stopped during your breastfeeding journey. I have a detailed blog on breastfeeding for Indian women with some recipes also attached and a meal plan created. The blog is linked in the notes below, in the caption below. Please do check it out. And if you want to work with my team one-on-one, set up an exploratory call. Link to the same is also in the caption below. Really hope this helps.